who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello and good evening. This is Don Swans, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the December 7th issue of the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Front page, as usual, a salacious stew of publicity and revenge. Well, that sounds interesting. I wonder what that's all about. A very public battle between two media stars has become the irresistible spectacle of the moment, maybe because so little is at stake. It's written by regular contributor Joshua Chafin. This week, denizens of the overlapping worlds of politics and media were able to shove aside the usual preoccupations about President Trump, our hyper-polarized era, the midterms, a possible war with Venezuela, the existing threat of AI, and much else to focus on. The epic is a dumpster fire breakup of two-star journalists and their third wheel, Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. The feud between Olivia Nuzzi and Ryan Lisa has been bubbling for months. This week, though, was its signature event with the publication of Nuzzi's much-anticipated account of the tumultuous episode American Canto. I'm not afraid to say I'm obsessed with this drama. Semaphore editor Josh Billinson posted on X, seeming to speak for many, in a cluttered information age where attention is a prized and scarce commodity, Nuzzi and Litza, with their perfectly counterpoised surnames, have somehow broken through. From the UK Guardian, columnist Marina Hyde warned the U.S. media against its self-serious tendency to cover the affair as nothing other than a good shagging scandal. Everything about it is darkly hysterical, she wrote. It should obviously be being written as comedy. Instead, the story is being chronicled with maximum portentousness by its own protagonists. As public scandals go, Nuzzi Lisa has much to recommend it. It lacks the darkness and inscrutability at the core of the Jeffrey Epstein saga. There are no victims, only a bonfire of prominent narcissists. Monica Lewinsky has apparently been performing the wellness checks on Nuzzi this week. But unlike Lewinsky in the Clinton White House, Nuzzi 32 was a powerful adult journalist, not an overmatched intern. When she entangled herself with an older politician, Nuzzi Lisa is just consequential enough to be passable in polite discussion without really mattering all that much. There's the thrill of a War of the Roses-style blood feud running at social media velocity. Time was when an literary score settling by erstwhile lovers like Philip Roth and Claire Bloom took months or years to play out. But as American Canto was marching toward publication, Lisa last month launched a guerrilla attack with a series of installments on his Substack, offering his side of the story. They are intentionally intimate, a bit gross, and utterly compelling, like a colonoscopy that one cannot turn away from. They are also seasoned with the erotic poetry that Lisa says Kennedy wrote for Nuzzi. It is best enjoyed when read in the voice of Will Ferrell's character from the film Anchorman. Drink from me, love. I mean to squeeze your cheeks, to force open your mouth. I'll hold your nose as you look up at me to encourage you to swallow. Don't spill a drop. I'm a river. You are my canyon. I mean to flow through you. I mean to subdue and tame you, my love. It's possible this is what Nuzzi was contemplating when she wrote this statement of intent early in American Canto. I mean to tell you that, as it relates to monsters, little can be assured beyond their ceaseless want. That you feed the monster, and the monster only wants more. That here you have surrendered to the endless transaction, and through the terms on which you meet the monster, you are transformed monstrous, too. For the day that the monster is done waiting is the day the sun doesn't rise. Want makes the monster as sun makes the day. To rewind for the uninitiated, Nuzzi was a young phenom political reporter. After a stint working for Congressman Anthony Weiner, a pioneer in political sexting scandals, she jumped to the Daily Beast and then at 24 became the Washington correspondent for New York Magazine. A deft writer with an eye for the absurd, she seemed to work in a different register from the mainstream press pack, with a sensibility well-tuned to the weirdness of the mega moment. Where most every other liberal journalist was a monotone in his or her censorious and horror about Donald Trump, Nuzzi, with the distinctness of voice, almost always managed to come through the back door and shed a new cockeyed light on the cockeyed situation. Michael Wolff, another unorthodox and controversial Trump chronicler, wrote this in her defense. Nuzzi's methods are certainly unusual. It turns out she writes not on a computer but on a phone, often while hiking. It's easier to work with my idiosyncrasies instead of against them, she explained to readers of Emily Sandberg's Feed Me newsletter. For a time, she and Lisa 19 years her senior, reigned as a minor royals in the Nerd Prom of Washington. That's Washington, D.C. The happy couple shared a house in Georgetown and were contracted to write a book together. But there was a kind of frantic hustle beneath the glamour. At 18, Lucy has fled her native New Jersey and begun dating broadcaster Keith Olbermann, who was then 52. Turned out I was too young for Olivia. Olbermann quipped on a recent episode of his podcast. He has since stated that they did not become intimate until she was 19. Oh, phew. Lisa casts himself as another savior, writing, "I had helped her untangle herself from an unusual relationship." He was himself a wonderkind political reporter, first for the New Republic and then during a decade at the New Yorker. But he was fired in 2017 for unspecified Me Too type violations, which he denies. He now lives outside the walled city of the traditional media in the wilds of internet newsletters. Newsy Lisa was demolished a little more than a year ago by the bombshell revelation that she had begun a sexting affair with RFK Jr. while profiling him for New York Magazine. RFK Jr., who has remained mostly silent, denies this. There's more. In the cliffhanger ending to Lisa's first installment, Part 1, How I Found Out, he alleges that Nutzi had done the same thing years earlier with another subject, Mark Sanford, the former South Carolina governor, who was famously lost hiking the Appalachian Trail. Kennedy declined to comment, and Sanford didn't respond to a request for comment. Lisa has since accused his ex of high journalistic malpractice for acting as a secret operative to help RFK Jr. during his presidential campaign. Nutzi has not backed down. During her promotional tour, she dismissed Lisa's writings as abuse, relocated to the public square, and dressed up as some sort of noble crusade, and obsessive and violating fan fiction / revenge porn. She has a withering way of never uttering her former fiancé's name, referring to him as a man I met when I was 19. Nutzi signed earlier this year as Vanity Fair's West Coast editor, but she and the magazine said this week that they have agreed to part ways. In various appearances this week, she came across as a kind of entertaining, possibly unstable character who might come to regret bumming a cigarette from late at night in a college dorm as outside a tedious launch party. In fact, more than one Feed Me reader acknowledged having met Newsy in such a fashion. At times it has been bumpy. On Tim Miller's Bulwark podcast, Newsy paused for a cry when pressed to explain why she had not screamed from the rooftop about RFK Jr.'s sins during his confirming hearing as Secretary of Health and Human Services. That omission has made her a villain to those aghast as he slashes through funding for vaccines and cancer treatments, including his own cousin Tatiana Schlossberg, now suffering through terminal cancer. What if anything, this attention bomb adds up to is hard to say. What if anything this attention bomb adds up to is hard to say, is a better read. It may not be book sales or literary glory. Tina Brown called American Canto absurdly pretentious, wincing as its repeated invocations of Joan Didion's unsettling Santa Ana winds. Helen Lewis also found it wanting, writing in the Atlantic, all the surf and smoke and Didion-esque stylings in the world cannot disguise the central problem with American Canto. It is not honest. Indeed, Nutsi and Lisa may forever be joined by their love of torture metaphors, while she goes on and on about the California wildfires and those winds he writes of in the invasive bamboo in their garden in his futile effort to tame it, just as I had with the secrets that Olivia and I shared. Improbable as it seems, some speculate that Newsy and Lisa may yet have a future if there is still a tension to be milked. A humorist, Lauren Grimaldi, posted on X this week, part 16 by Ryan Lisa, Why I'm Engaged to Olivia Newsy Again. In the meantime, readers will have American Canto and Newsy musings such as this to ponder. I mean to tell you that this is more meaningful and more meaningless than you might think. Oh. This is the reader commenting, I wonder why the review wasted so much time printing that. Oh well. There is a column that appears regularly. The title About Face. A column about how someone changed their mind. This week's submission is written by Sunita Parasuraman. Subtitle, The First Time I Left the Vehicle Take Control, Something Shifted. The main title is I used to hate my commute. My self-driving car taught me to let go. When I first met my husband, one of the things that attracted me was his love of driving. He's not exactly an expert. His passengers don't always feel safe. But he enjoys long drives. As someone who dislikes being behind the wheel, the idea of having him chauffeur me around tipped the scales in his favor. Driving has always felt like a chore to me. For more than a decade, I commuted long distances every day. The routine was exhausting, and the constant pressure on my feet eventually gave me a plantar fasciitis. Then in 2018, I bought one of the first Tesla Model 3s. When I discovered its traffic-aware cruise control feature, I was thrilled. For the first time, my feet could relax. It took time to trust the technology, but once I did, driving became bearable. Even as the strain lessened and my commutes felt smoother, I held back from ceding control to Tesla's auto lane change. I was content to let the car ease my effort, but not ready to let it replace my own judgment. My husband, meanwhile, traded his leased Tesla like a toy. When it was time for a renewal, he upgraded to a Model Y with supervised full self-driving. Watching him use this technology was both thrilling and a little nerve-wracking. The car adjusted the speed, handled turns, navigated stop signs, made lane changes on the freeway, and even responded to traffic lights. It had 3 settings: chill, standard, and hurry. He displayed the giddy delight of a teenager showing off a new gadget. I knew the system had safety measures. If the driver wasn't paying attention, it would warn you, and if you ignored several alerts, it would temporarily suspend FSD, a strikeout. Even so, I wasn't sure I could fully trust it. What if the software failed and I crashed? What if I became complacent and stopped paying attention? What if my brain dulled from lack of engagement? As I rode with my husband more often, sometimes something unexpected happened. I stopped gripping the armrest. I stopped worrying. Sitting beside him, I found myself carried along by the car's deliberate flowing motions, and slipped away into a calm I'd cultivated through meditation. A few days before the federal EV tax credit expired in September, I traded in my 7.5-year-old Model 3 for a Model Y with FSD. The first time I let the vehicle take control, something shifted. As the car guided itself through traffic, I felt tension melt away. It wasn't just the case of the rider. It was the sensation of letting go. For someone like me who likes to stay in control, surrender has never come easily. Yet here I was, cruising through traffic in quiet surrender to the car's code and sensors. It felt like liberation. And now I have something better than a chauffeur. My car never tires, panics, or wavers. It doesn't jolt at brake lights or grumble at traffic jams. It simply drives with quiet confidence and near perfect composure. People often worry that technology makes us lazy. Well, maybe it does. But in my case, it has done something subtler. It taught me to trust in the rhythm of the ride. It is a small miracle I never expected from a car. Well, I've had a little problem with the computer here, so I may be repeating myself a little bit, but let me say we're going to start reading and go in a new direction, and the title of the article is The Joy of Learning to Motorcycle in My 70s. That's right, in my 70s. It's written by Noel Annenberg, a professor of creative writing at the Pierce College in Los Angeles and author of the novel The Dog Boy. Most people believe riding a motorcycle is death-defying. As I turn 79, it's been nothing but life-affirming for me. My wife of 51 years and I split our time between our home in the Santa Monica Mountains and Mill Valley, California, where our kids and grandkids live. When I mentioned my desire to take up motorcycle riding at age 74, a much nicer way to take in the scenery along Highway 101 on a trip to see the family in Northern California, she reacted as if I were planning to jump out of an airplane without a parachute. Are you out of your mind? Go play golf with your friends. My daughter put it more bluntly. Dad, you're going to get yourself killed. I tried to steady everyone's nerves by citing the stats. True, motorcyclists involved in accidents have an 80% chance of serious injury or death. Pretty scary. But other data was encouraging. In 2022, for example, out of 941,548 registered California bikers, only 1.2%, that's 1.2, that's a small number, were involved in accidents. Most heart and cancer patients would be thrilled to face such odds. For me, the urge to tame a two-wheeled beast wasn't some fleeting or idle fantasy. A septuagenarian version of a midlife crisis. Learning to ride would keep me from letting the old man in, as Clint Eastwood says. And as someone who's grappled with bouts of depression, I'd found that challenging myself physically keeps thoughts of gloom and doom at bay. The more joy I feel about life, the less I think about dying. Carving on the face of a wave, skiing, or snowboarding down a deep powder glade, summiting a Sierra Nevada peak, hitting a pure tee shot, running, biking, swimming, all of those have been reliable elixirs for pulling up and out of the undertowed, to borrow an expression from John Irving. When a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis made some of my favorite sports too painful, I was determined not to allow adventure to disappear from my life. It was time to choose an outlet my body could tolerate. With everyone worrying over my safety, a step-by-step approach seemed wisest, so I started by purchasing a 20-mile-per-hour e-bike. I felt like a little kid, especially when my wife had to pick me up miles from home when the battery died. It only took a few rides to realize it would not satisfy my need for speed. I traded up for an electric moped, top speed 35 miles per hour. And when I got tired of that, to an even sportier gas-powered Italian scooter, a red Vespa. That was fun. But its automatic transmission and small engine still left me feeling bored. In surfing and skiing, the edges of the skis and the board I used to maneuver. A motorcycle's manual transmission plays a comparable role in handling. In all of these activities, the body and equipment work in unison to control speed and direction. I wanted to apply what I'd learned to motorcycle riding. I've had moments of terror in big turf, but getting bombed by a big wave isn't nearly as scary as crashing a 600-pound motorcycle at 65 mph. Another statistic from my research stood out. 95% of fatal motorcycle accidents involve a rider who did not take a motorcycle safety course. My next step was signing up for the Highway Patrol's motorcycle safety program with the proviso that if I passed, I would buy a small motorcycle, and if I failed, I'd take up a safer hobby like singing my favorite Hank Williams songs. The course teaches basic skills like accelerating, turning, swerving, and emergency braking. I passed the riding test after only 2 attempts, and I learned that a healthy dose of fear while riding would actually keep me alive. I started with a small 230cc bike, kept my speeds low and stuck to quiet residential streets. In my helmet, gloves, knee pads, and a jacket with elbow, shoulder, and back protection, I felt like a hockey goalie. After a month into riding, I accelerated through a left turn across a slick intersection. The rear wheel slipped, and I went down hard. I heard my helmet crack on the pavement. Several friendly drivers stopped to help. I was unhurt, but when I arrived home, I told my wife what happened and said I didn't want to ride anymore. But that feeling didn't last long. The next day, I was out on the road again. There's a wonderful sense of freedom on a motorcycle, as life's quotidian problems seem to vanish in the rearview mirror. I took another baby step, graduated to a bike with a 310cc engine, faster than the 230cc's, but still too light for the open road. And then I decided to go big and traded up to a BMW RI 300 GS adventure bike. Compared with the smaller bikes I had, it was a beast. It terrified me at first, but I stayed away from traffic and gradually learned how to handle it. I felt like a cowboy who'd broken a wild horse. While stopping with my wife at a gas station near Monterey Bay, a young guy in a red Ducati Multistrada, the Ferrari of motorcycles, pulled up at the next pump. He caught me studying his bike and said hello. I asked, "How's the ride north?" His grin said it all. I was totally stoked. All I needed to do was muster the courage to tell my wife Her response again, "Are you out of your mind?" Highway 101, El Camino Real, strikes northwest out of Los Angeles to Santa Barbara, then winds gently across the rolling hills of the Santa Ynez Valley and the verdant farmland of California's Central Valley to Salinas, the setting for John Steinbeck's novel, East of Eden. It continues north to the Big Surf coast of Monterey and Santa Cruz. I decided to leave at the first hint of dawn, about 5 a.m. When I released the clutch and took off, my spirit filled with joy. And any anxieties about my age or declining faculties disappeared. I stopped for breakfast in Santa Monica. In Salinas, I headed to Sang's Cafe, where Steinbeck had been a regular. Sadly, Sang's was no more. So I settled for a Subway sandwich from a filling station. My helmet is set up with Bluetooth speakers and a mic so that I can stay in touch and listen to music. As I crooned, "I'll never get out of this world alive," along with Hank Williams, I added a little yodel. I'm not going to worry wrinkles in my brow, 'cause nothing's ever going to be all right. Nohow. No matter how I struggle and strive, I'll never get out of this world alive. I crossed the Golden Gate in the late afternoon, feeling like Eisenhower marching into Paris through the Arc de Triomphe as I rode into Mill Valley to meet my wife and family. All the trials and tribulations I'd encountered from the e-bike to making this 400-mile run faded in the glow of my grandkids' smiles. I was physically wiped out, but elated. I'm already looking forward to the next adventure, the trip through Yellowstone and along Montana's Beartooth Highway with my friend and motorcycle coach, Andy Lehman. Morocco is on deck. Not everyone's cut out for the Hells Angels. I'm certainly not. But everyone has the capacity to overcome fear and keep the old man out. All we have to do is try. You've been listening, or you are listening, to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Regular contributor Katie Roffey has her column, Personal Space, ready for us on page 3 with this question: why are so many women dreaming of rustic domesticity? The other day I noticed that a surprising number of women I know are following the Instagram account of a woman in the Scottish countryside whose horses picturesquely wander into cottages' rustic kitchen. There are tousled children in thick wool sweaters and copper pots hanging from the ceiling. What is the appeal of this old-fashioned home life? Why are so many busy urban people drawn to it? There is something reassuring about these storybook images. No matter your politics, it is alarming to walk through New York City streets against an apocalyptically orange sky after the California fires, or to contemplate ChatGPT's ability to write our sentences and think our thoughts. As William Wordsworth put it, the world is too much with us. No wonder there is an appetite for unchanging domestic interiors, for dispatches from a slower, simpler life. For me, the most sublimely comforting of these domestic vistas is Victoria Woolf's cult Instagram account. Our Megaset house. She and her husband, the Trump chronicler Michael Wolff, his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein has been in the news in recent weeks, left the city over a year ago. They now live full-time with their 2 children in a beautiful, drafty 1829 farmhouse. The account offers glimpses of their new life. There's a framed painting of a ship tossed in a stormy sea, pies made from blackberries picked in the garden, quilts strewn on couches, an American flag hanging on the front porch. We see a wood-burning stove, framed drawings of ferns. Through the Wolf farmhouse is technically in the Hamptons. This is a Hamptons entirely without glitz. No $50 lobster salads, or traffic stores, or traffic snarls, or Prada stores. Her version harks back to painters moving east for the light. There are wild tangles of black-eyed Susans and sunflowers. There's applesauce, made with an apple peeler you crank by hand, simmering on the stove. These images are a bulwark against change at a time when things seem to be changing at an alarming rate. Dreamy photographs of baskets on exposed wood beams and straw hats hanging on peg hooks. Quiet thoughts such as, will my job be replaced by AI? They may also be feeding a deep childhood notion of home that we carry in our heads. Something we read in Little House on the Prairie or Little Women, an idealized vision of family happiness. They connect with the mythic American past. Victoria began her Instagram account after staging videos for her husband's political commentary as he processes disturbing news cycles, holding a coffee mug while sitting, say, at the kitchen table. The house is telling its own story about what lasts and what matters. Victoria quickly realized that people were finding the setting reassuring, even if the political sagas and unsavory characters in his world were stressful. She decided to launch her own account that would just be about the domestic scene. In times of upheaval, people turn inward, Victoria says. People are nesting. Your home is one thing you can control. Hundreds of comments on Victoria's videos are peppered with words such as tranquility, balm, and respite from this messy world. One commenter said her videos feel like 8 hours of sleep. They offer a kind of rest, a reassurance and counterpoint to everything else flowing through our phones. This kind of aspirational domestic content is often associated with red state mindsets. But the allure is wider than it appears, in some sense. The trad wife is freed from political leanings, no longer coded conservative, but here available as fantasy for everyone. There is a timeless vision of domestic life that can be soothing and transporting, even for the resolutely working mother or happily urban person. The caveat is that most of us cannot afford this particular beauty we are watching here. Most of us can't simply uproot our life, quit our jobs, and move to a carefully curated farmhouse in the country. For many of the gawkers and voyeurs, this is pure fantasy, a kind of calming, momentary escape. You may point out that it is a little ironic that these images of timeless, unchanging domestic life come to us for our screens. But you could also argue that we should take our bursts of comfort where we can. An old friend, Alexandra Carmazano, who recently published a book, Chocolat, has had a front row seat to the comforting ascendance of the domestic arts. At reading and events, people tell her we need chocolate now more than ever. Or on an airplane recently, she noticed that when the stewardess came around offering coffee and tea, a surprising number of adults opted for hot chocolate. She tells me that she knows lots of people who read recipes to fall asleep when they're anxious or jittery. Another old friend, Deborah Needleman, left her high-powered job as a magazine editor and became an expert basket weaver. Over 47,000 people follow her Instagram account, which is checkered with beautiful baskets strewn across her peaceful workshop. Peonies, exquisitely arranged on a country table, fires in the fireplace, framed prints of flowers, whimsical wallpaper, ravished gardens bursting into bloom. Who wouldn't want to escape to this place, even for 3 seconds on a crowded subway? The tacit message of all this content is that we are still gathering with friends, baking a cake for a dinner party, or laying out Indian print cloth napkins. And so the world must not be burning down. The dreamy vistas of domestic arts, which may have once seemed frivolous, passé, even politically retrograde for some, become a source of deep allure for people of different political stripes. Do they matter, these domestic rituals? I notice myself feeling disproportionately upset when I lose my matches and I can't light the candles on my table for a regular weeknight family dinner. Dinner without candles. How can this possibly matter, or more precisely, how have I become a person this matters too? But these small solaces take on more power in these uncertain times. The flickering candle may be a whisper from the universe. Life goes on. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Review of the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Let's conclude with this little column entitled Mysteries by Tom Nolan. Subtitle: A London lawyer turns detective after the delivery of grisly presents. It's Christmas Eve, 1901, at the start of a case of life and limb. Sally Smith's second book, featuring Gabriel Ward, a resident of the London community of attorneys known as the Inner Temple. This age-old enclave, blanketed in pristine snow, seems to Gabriel the very embodiment of the three-dimensional Christmas card. The seasonal calm disappears when several tenants receive anonymous packages containing body parts and mordant notes. Can I give you a hand? The temple's treasurer, desperate to avoid a scandal, dragoons Gabriel into finding out who's behind these grisly deeds. Despite previous sleuthing success, Gabriel is a reluctant detective, but when another morbid delivery prompts a fatal heart attack to its recipient, he vows to avenge his neighbor. Ms. Smith, herself a barrister and Inner Temple resident, nicely balances scenes of legal and detective work, peppering the narrative with details about her characters' personal lives and backstories. Gabriel grows as an attorney and human being by embracing the empathy he feels for his clients and other citizens. With its lawyerly shenanigans and emotional poignancy, a case of life and limb is a real corker, as a policeman who sometimes counsels Gabriel might say. Money is scarce for Thad and Hazen, two brothers who live in a cabin near Yellowstone National Park. In Callan Wink's Beartooth, published by Spiegel and Grau, the pair eke out a living by chopping and selling timber. That should be read as the pair eke out a living by chopping and selling timber, and more lucratively hunting bears out of season for a dealer always in the market for heads, pelts, paws, and gallbladders. This strange customer, known as the Scot, wears a kilt and carries a chrome-plated pistol. One day the Scot suggests a way their brothers might supplement their income. I could sell as many elk antlers as I could possibly get my hands on, and at a good price, too. Well, this week there are several other books that are available. Blood Ties is another one. That's a book by Joe Nesbo, published by Knopf. Translated from the Norwegian by Robert Ferguson. Roy has spent much of his life cleaning up the criminal messes of his younger brother Carl, as the pair build a modest business, a hotel, spa, and gas station on the remote mountain village of Oz. Altogether, Roy sums up, Carl and I have killed 7 people. He's not proud of that. He insists it was just something that had to be done for the family. Well, Blood Ties is a sequel to The Kingdom. Though the new work can be read on its own, just when did it happen? Roy asks himself, when exactly did you lose your touch with your own humanity? Flashbacks provides chapters and verse, but there is little more for remorse or reminiscence. Current conundrums demand Roy's immediate attention. Among them, a vengeful sheriff who's convinced of the siblings' homicidal past is determined to see them punished. New DNA evidence may offer the proof needed to put at least one of them away. Carl's duplicitous behavior, meanwhile, leads Roy to think his brother is planning to make him the fall guy for their mutual misdeeds. How, he wonders, might he defend himself? It's leavened by dark humor. Blood Ties is a breathtaking in conception and execution, with a perversely pastoral finale. Well, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 7th issue of the Wall Street Journal Review. We read from the Wall Street Journal Review every Thursday at 7 p.m., like we did tonight. Your reader has been Don Swans, who thoroughly enjoys reading this for you, and I hope that you receive it in the same fashion. We thank you for listening, and certainly hope that we see you next week, same time, at the same place on the dial of the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the New York Times. Following that at 9 o'clock is Fortune Magazine. And at 10 o'clock, we have episode number 4 of Homestand by Will Bardenwerper. Stay with us for these readings and more. If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's registered tapes. Radio Reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,